Director, Confederation of Open Access Repositories. Our special guest, Mrs. Goh Soo Nee, the Deputy Director, Nanyang Technological University, Singapore. Shri K. Jayakumar, President DELNET, Dr. S.S. Murthy, Vice President DELNET, Dr. P.R. Goswami, Treasurer, heads of institutions, including the directors, principals, deans, HODs, distinguished librarians and library and information science professionals, OS specialists, educational administrators, IQAC officials, faculty, researchers, scholars, students, my colleagues here at DELNET New Delhi and also its coordination units at Bangalore, Hyderabad, and Pune, ladies and gentlemen. I, Dr. Sangeeta Kaul, Director DELNET New Delhi, on behalf of DELNET, extends a very warm, hearty welcome to all of you to have joined us today in person at DELNET New Delhi and also online from various parts of the country and many other nations across the globe, including Australia, Bhutan, Canada, Denmark, Ireland, Japan, Kazakhstan, Nigeria, and UAE for an enlightening lecture on the critical role of libraries in an open science world, which will shortly be delivered by our most esteemed expert speaker, Dr. Kathleen Shearer. We are much grateful to each one of you for your very overwhelming response, as more than 1,300 participants have registered for today's session. At the very outset, on behalf of DELNET, we would like to express our very warm, sincere gratitude and thanks to the distinguished speaker for acceding to our request to be here with us today to share her vast wisdom and expertise. It is a moment of great honor and privilege to have you among us, Dr. Kathleen, and it's indeed, we remain much grateful to you for your very gracious presence with us this morning. Thank you so very much, Dr. Kathleen. Thank you. Dr. As many of us are aware, is visiting New Delhi for organizing the 2-day COAR Asia OA meeting on the promise and practice of open science, which will commence tomorrow at UNESCO New Delhi, organized in collaboration with AISS MS College of Engineering, Pune. The entire library fraternity in India joins DELNET in extending a very warm welcome to Dr. Kathleen Shearer to New Delhi. Thank you so very much once again for your very gracious acceptance and very kind intellectual presence with us. As informed by Dr. Kathleen, this is her visit to India after almost a decade. So it's indeed, we are happy and feeling very blessed that this visit is entirely meant for meeting the library professionals in the country, and we remain truly grateful to you. I have immense pleasure in introducing Dr. Kathleen Shearer. Dr. Kathleen has been the Executive Director of COAR, Confederation of Open Access Repositories, since 2013, and has been working in the area of open access, open science, scholarly communications, and research data management for over 15 years. COAR, as many of us are aware already, is an international association with over 130 members spread across the world, representing the libraries, universities, research institutions, government funders, and others. COAR brings together the individual repositories and repository networks in order to build capacity, align policies and practices, and acts as a global voice for the repository community. Dr. Kathleen is based in Montreal in Canada and participates in numerous other organizations to advance open science around the world. She is the author of numerous publications and delivered many presentations at international events. Most recently, she was a lead author of the paper, Fostering Bibliodiversity in Scholarly Communications, a Call for Action, published in April 2020, and presented the keynote speech at the Open Repositories Conference. Dr. Shearer is also a research associate with the Canadian Association of Research Libraries and has been instrumental in many of the CAL's activities related to open science, including the launch of FORGATE initiative in Canada, a national research data management network. I have profound honor and pleasure in requesting Dr. Kathleen Shearer to kindly deliver the invited talk on the critical role of libraries in an open science world. May I have a pleasure of requesting you, Dr. Kathleen.
Well, first of all, thank you very much, Sangeeta, for that wonderful introduction and for inviting me to be here. It's a real pleasure. I was supposed to be here in November, but there was an unfortunate diplomatic dispute between Canada and India, and I was unable to get a visa. So I'm really glad we were able to reschedule. our meetings. So, Suprabhat, good morning from New Delhi, and welcome to all of the people in the room and also to all of the people we have online today. The topic of my talk today is really about what are the new trends in open science. Open science has been something that we have been discussing for the last 15, 20 years now, but our thinking around how that open science should be implemented is really changing based on a number of factors and based on our early experience with implementation. As Sangeeta mentioned, my organization COAR is an international association. We represent repositories writ large. We are a membership organization, but most of what we do, most of the outcomes and the work that we do is made available to the broader repository community. And our members are really driving forward where they see the role and the future for repositories. So that's what motivates our members to join, because we really strongly believe that we want all repositories, all 6,000 repositories around the world to be advanced by the work that we do. So I think very important when I start my talk is to help you understand the underlying principles behind the work that we do at COAR and that I do personally. And one is a belief that knowledge is a public good, not a private good, and that we should be treating knowledge like that. So the mechanisms, the infrastructure, the services that we provide around knowledge sharing really should be considered as part of public infrastructure and a very important public good. And the second underlying foundation for my work is how can we help researchers achieve what they want? And what do researchers really want? What we hear all the time is that researchers want to publish in a high impact journal. That's because they're incentivized to do that by the current incentive systems. When you ask researchers, what do you need to really undertake first-class leading-edge research? This is what they really want. They want a system of interoperable digital research objects. They want immediate availability of research articles. They don't want to wait 18 months for articles to be published. They want data, they want code, they want systems that help them to be able to analyze and reuse that content. And they want it to be open. They want the work that they do to be able to be open to others to contribute to the research advancement in their field. And so again, I think this is a very important principle, foundational principle of the work that we do. So if you look at the evolution of open science over the last 25 years, we started really with the digital transformation, shall we say, where we moved from print journals and books to the digital environment. And then it was wonderful because we could have access to a lot of digital content, but there were still so many barriers, especially for researchers in developing countries, to be able to access research articles in their fields. And so the idea of open access really came out of this. But shall we say, the main strategy around providing open access, we are now seeing as perhaps having some challenges and some defects. Because what that strategy was, and it was very much driven by the global north, was to use your subscription funding and to convince the publishers to provide open access to those articles instead of subscription-based funding. But unfortunately, what happened is that it created another barrier, a barrier to being able to publish. As the publishers change their business models from subscription to, well, we need to get paid to publish, essentially article processing charges or something like that. What does that mean? It means researchers in developing countries are completely shut out of that system. And those researchers, frankly speaking, don't want to rely on waivers or the goodwill or the charity of northern developing countries. So I think we collectively are very much at a place where we know this model will not work at a global level. And there's been a lot of reassessing, even in northern developed countries, that about whether we should move away from this model. So I don't know why this doesn't show the title on this, but what is really driving open science right now are policies. It's very much a top-down exercise for open science. This is why we see open science being widely embraced in certain regions where there are very strong open access and open science policies, and why we see it being very weakly adopted in some other countries. Things that has come out very recently that I think is having already a very, very big influence on open science around the world is the UNESCO recommendation on open science. And until this came out, I think we saw mainly and developed countries who were adopting open science policy. And the UNESCO recommendation for open science undertook a really very extensive consultation process involving a lot of different stakeholder communities. And instead of driving towards open science at any cost, the recommendation is really about how open science can work in a diversity of countries who have very different levels of resources. And so I think we're starting to see now, I was in Africa last month. They're talking a lot about, the governments there are talking a lot about the UNESCO open science recommendations. And so they really are, in a way, a lodestar for many countries in terms of how to help navigate these various requirements around open science. And one of the things they talk about is community-based, non-commercial approaches. And I think it's very important for us to keep that in mind. Other challenges that I encounter a lot is in my global travels as COAR executive director, is trying to achieve this balance between global and local. And I think we've been able to achieve that very well. There has been, and I'm sure you recognize this in your own local conditions, a lot of pressure for researchers to publish in international journals. And those international journals, everybody can read them. Well, if you can pay the subscriptions, you can read them, but they are considered the top level journals. And of course, those journals are all published in English. And they incentivize researchers to undertake research on certain topics that will be of interest at the international level, not at the local level. So one of the aspects that comes out in the UNESCO science recommendations and has been very much on the minds of policymakers is how we can rebalance our priorities towards also thinking about how to incentivize local research that really supports addressing the problems in your given country. Research that is published in the language of your population so they can actually read the articles that are being published. So this is what we call bibliodiversity. So instead of thinking of everybody moving towards and trying to publish their English language article in a high prestige international journal, we're starting to think about what can we do, how can we create a system that supports bibliodiversity. And bibliodiversity means publishing in different languages, sharing different types of research outputs, recognizing researchers who are not the primary researchers, for example, who do the data collection. So really expanding our ideas in terms of acknowledging the different types of research outputs. Is everything okay? Okay, there. Did it change for you? So I was speaking earlier about policy as being one of the main drivers of open science, and I'd like to present to you some of the more recent trends in policy adoption, which I think are quite important and will have big implications for the work we do at libraries. One is that we're seeing the major policy, open access policies, remove any embargo periods on sharing of research articles. So the initial cohort of open access policies were that, okay, you need to make your article openly available, but you can wait for 12 months or 6 months. But sort of the new policies that are coming out, and in particular, European Commission, Coalition S, which is a group of European funders, and the United States are all, by 2025, going to require immediate availability of research articles that they fund. And you may say, oh, this doesn't really mean very much for me because I'm in India. But if you look at the co-authorship of papers between Indian researchers and researchers in the United States and Europe, that's quite high. So even though these policies are not directly affecting the Indian researchers, I expect very much that there will be a change in behavior in many other countries because of this co-authorship. So the other policy trend that I think is also very important is sharing of research data. So not only now are researchers being asked to share their articles, they are being asked to share the underlying data that backs up the claims in their articles. So again, China, the United States, Europe is very much moving towards requiring that data is shared. And the implications for this, I think, are very large because it takes a lot of new knowledge by the research community to understand how to format and manage their data so that somebody else can understand it. And it takes a whole new level of infrastructure to be able to collect and provide access to data. So this is something I think that will come up a little bit later in my talk in terms of what libraries can do. the policy of the Gates Foundation. They just recently updated their policy, and they were at a place where they had an immediate open access policy, and they were paying very, very high article processing charges for ensuring that their articles were openly available. And essentially they got fed up with that. And they have said, no, you know what? We don't care if you publish your article. What's important to us is that you deposit your article, your preprint, into a preprint server or a repository and make it available. And then we hope that we will start to see some peer review services that evolve that do external peer review on articles. So in a way, we're starting to see a decoupling of the traditional workflow of scholarly publishing, where you would immediately deposit your preprint, and then an external service, a lightweight overlay journal might do the review. I think if you want to look at who is a leader in the area of open science, I would point to France. They have a very, very coordinated approach. They have actually an open science plan. They've identified all the important stakeholders who are part of the ecosystem there. They have funding for infrastructure to support research data sharing, to support depositing of articles. They have a very large national repository in France. And just recently, they launched the French Open Science Monitor. So now now they're actually tracking the compliance of their researchers with their policy. So I think that's a policy that really has teeth, shall we say, because it's being closely watched, and researchers who don't comply with the policy are now, they're able to identify those researchers. Just a brief comment about some of the major challenges we're finding in the open as we transition to open science. One is the thing I discussed earlier. How do you achieve that right balance between supporting local needs, but also international visibility and discoverability? We don't want all these local siloed infrastructures not to be able to talk to each other or to share information. Researchers in Canada should be able to know what kind of research is happening in India and vice versa. But we also want to support local needs. We have an indigenous communities in Canada who want to publish in their own language. So what's our path forward there? Developing and maintaining the infrastructures and services needed to curate and preserve a wide variety of research outputs is also a challenge. If you imagine how much research data there is, you know, we think of it as an iceberg where you can just see the tip of the iceberg above the water, and underneath there's just a huge amount. So there's a lot of infrastructure that has to be built and maintained, and a lot of services that go around that infrastructure to support especially sharing of research data. So to me, each country needs to start thinking about how they can begin to expand and enhance their existing infrastructure to support that. And part of the way to do that is redirecting some of the funding away from these large commercial publishers, if we can, towards open science services. So we did a survey in Canada at the Canadian libraries, I guess it was about 5 years ago, and we looked at what percentage of the library budget is going towards open science, and it was about 3%. And I mean, we really looked at every possible service and the staffing and so on, whereas 40 or 50% of the library budget is going towards subscriptions. So I think in that sense, we need to think of a way where we can start to move some of that funding away from the large publishers towards the infrastructures that we think are more important and that can really support our vision of the future. And then I think critical, the last point number 4, is the research assessment system. And without changes in the research assessment system, it will be very hard for us to achieve any of this. Because right now, as Suni was telling me in the car over here, her institution is very keen on being very high up in the rankings. And to be high up in the rankings, you need to publish in the high impact journals. And to get promotion and tenure, you need to be publishing in certain journals. So I think the issue around research assessment is key. And this is something that there's a couple of projects that I wanted to point you to, which I'm not sure where they are here. A project called DORA, which was launched out of the United States, and another one called COAR, which is based in Europe, but is an international, they're both actually international. And they're really targeting university administration and trying to create a coalition of like-minded administrators who want to move together to move forward with adopting new measures for assessing research output, including, openness of the kinds of thing that you're sharing and so on like that. Back to a couple of things. I thought it would be important just to talk about the issue of languages. How many languages are there in India? How many local languages are there in India? Quite a few, I'm guessing. 22, but potentially more. Yeah. So that's a lot of languages, and there's this initiative called the Helsinki Initiative on Multilingualism and Scholarly Communication that talks about how the disqualification of local or national languages in academic publishing is the most important and often forgotten factor that prevents societies from using and taking advantage of the research that is done where they live. And I think we really need to take, we really need to look at this issue around the pressure to publish in English and compare that to the benefits that our local public may get from having content published in their language. So if most Indian researchers are publishing in English, then it's sort of creating a barrier for local Indian people to be able to read that research. So for your information, at COAR, we brought together an international group to look at how we could improve in the repository landscape, how we could improve supporting non-English languages or multilingual content in repositories. And this content is available online with more detail and instructions and help in terms of how to implement it. But the idea really is to be able to support and encourage publishing in your own languages while also translating the abstract and the title and so on into English so that it can be part of the international corpus of research. Another thing I think which is very important is, again, like the investment in local open infrastructure. As I mentioned, even in Canada, quite a wealthy country, There's still very, very small investments compared to what we're investing in other ways. And so we need to think about how we can move some of that money towards local infrastructure. These are just two quotes from the UNESCO Open Science recommendations talking about how important that local infrastructure is. And we're starting to see a number of organizations who are trying to help with strategies around how to, again, like reinvest money into the open space. One of the challenges with that is it's not a direct gain. You know, there are a lot of free riders in the open space. You can invest in something, but you're investing in something that helps everybody. So you don't necessarily find a direct benefit gain, and it's sometimes hard to justify to your higher level administrators that you're putting money towards something like that. So this is something that very much I think we have to move together as a group, as a coalition, to be able to move this forward. There was another, here. This is the other initiative that I was talking about called SCOS, which I've forgotten what it is called, what it stands for. But they have done, what they do is they evaluate open infrastructures based on a number of criteria, the governance, to see how well it works, are the services good, and then they make a recommendation for their communities to invest in those particular infrastructures. And then the libraries who are participating in that say, okay, this has been vetted, we know this is a good service, some of our researchers are using this service, so we will invest. What the Canadians have done, for example, is they're part of the SCOS project, and then through their licensing consortia, they have put aside some money to invest in open infrastructure. So the licensing consortia has expanded its mission, in a sense, to go beyond just subscription, you know, licensing for subscriptions, and to also invest in infrastructures that they think are important. So I'm coming to the end of my talk now, but really the thing key important, and Sangeeta and I were talking about this earlier, is that we cannot do this alone. And an individual library can have very little impact on the ecosystem working alone. We really need to work as a collective, as a repository community, as a library community, across our various stakeholder communities, to come to a shared vision, to bring the funding together from various organizations and try to create a cohesive plan in terms of how we can move forward. And that is one of the reasons why we are here today, or I am here today, is to maybe begin that conversation with some stakeholders and colleagues here in India. And mainly, of course, because I represent COAR, a repository organization, we will be talking about how we can help to create a more cohesive repository network in India, so that repositories can share best practices, they can have a link with the international community, and they can adopt, you know, modern technologies and so on. So all of you are welcome to attend this meeting. It's going to be online as well. We're going to be live streaming it. And we will have, the first day will be from international speakers mainly, talking about from G20 countries, talking about open science. Sangeeta will be speaking tomorrow, I think. We'll have some researchers. And then the second day will be more of internal discussion about what to do next and how we can move forward together. I don't know if you were aware of this activity, but the last year, India was the chair of the G20, And the G20 Chief Science Advisors Roundtable met here in India, and they came out of that with an agreement to establish interoperability standards that allow interlinking across national and international repositories in the G20 countries. So there will also be representatives from the Indian government at our meetings tomorrow. And again, we hope to be able to use it as an opportunity to try to move this forward. And this is sort of the way that we have been working at COAR. You know, again, I mentioned we have 130 members, but that's a very small number compared to 600 repositories in the world. So what we try to do is work with national and regional groups to be able to, again, have the international link, but also enable local, you know, communities to be able to form and really drive things forward in their own local environment. So in Asia, we've had some loose interactions with several countries. We have a very strong relationship with Japan, but we would very much like to have a stronger relationship with India. And I think through a relationship with DELNET and InputNet, we could probably make something happen here. So we'll discuss that tomorrow and the 18th, I hope. And so, yes, the question is, can we launch a community of practice for repositories in India to help advance open science? It's sort of how we envision the ecosystem looking in the future, with many different types of research outputs openly available and connected to each other from around the world. Thank you very much.
So very much, Dr. Kathleen. Those here, you know, I request you join your hands together. Give a very, very special big applause to Dr. Kathleen Shearer for truly an enriching and enlightening talk on open science. The message loud and clear that we need to be together to establish connections, collaborations, as you have mentioned, and also to ensure that we are able to not only work together for a shared vision, but also to be the co-creators of the future that each one of us envision for our communities. We have to be together, and as I would like to mention, Dr. Kathleen, that DELNET being an organization devoted and dedicated for the cause of sharing and spreading knowledge, I'm very much pleased and honored also to inform to all our attendees here who are there with us in person and online, that already DELNET has, we are working for the past couple of, not even months, it's about a few years now, and we do hope that another maximum 6 months time, we are launching 2 major portals, which are truly in line with the kind of deliberations that we are having and what is being really desired. And that one of the major promising portal is a GRIP portal, GRIP, Global and Innovation Portal. Already we are working on that. It's a very state-of-the-art portal, and the entire aim and goal for developing that portal is to bring this global research and, most importantly, the researchers together and building up those strong global partnerships. So going from local to global or global to local, that is what, you know, that entire portal is designed for. So any researcher in any nook and part of the world may like to know who are the other experts working, let's say on nanofibers. They want to know who else is working on this. And through it's like you know, with the entire globe in place, they will be able to see who else. They may be sitting in any nook and part of the world, and they would be able to see who else is doing this, who they are, where they are. And also we are getting it interlinked with the research output. So this is what, Dr. Kathleen, I would like to say, that it's not just simply bringing that knowledge resource together, knowledge repository together. Also, we need to go beyond that. That is the real impact of that research, the impact assessment of that research. and that is being already integrated in that portal, wherein a particular research being undertaken, and we really want to see to it that what has been the research output of that particular research. So we would be really honored and happy to show you, because already a lot much of work we have put in, and another 6 months time, and we really look forward to having a partnerships, with COAR and also with the communities who are working at the global level. And this is the portal which we have been working on, and which we really hope that it will just be made available. And as I pointed it out this morning and informed you that once we came to know that you are going to be here, and also this UNESCO entire Asia OA meet, we have developed this knowledge repository portal. So as a test bed, having around 5 COAR members, the data being harvested, and wherein one can make a search. So tomorrow's, I do really look forward to showing some glimpse of it. And DELNET remains committed, and we will really feel honored, if you give a chance to DELNET to undertake some kind of a research, work, some kind of a work in bringing together everyone, the community together, and to work with you. It will be a great honor for us. So thank you very much, Dr. Kathleen, once again. We can't really thank you enough. Thank you so much. We are going to cherish and remember. And I still remember, when we tried, in the month of November having you, but what we were being destined to, to greet you, meet you, and to have this wonderful opportunity to have you here at DELNET, at DELNET's own abode here, rather than having you in Goa somewhere else. So thank you very much. We are really indeed much honored, and we are certainly going to remember it forever. And we have just opened up. It is just the beginning that we have made. And thank you so very much for giving us a chance, to have you here with us this morning. Thank you so much. And we remain truly, truly grateful to you for your very gracious presence, sensitizing, not many of our researcher community, research institutions, science and technology institutions in the country, that, you have given this message that, not only the policies which are being in place, but the messages to be together, to work together, establish those connections. Connections leads to collaborations that we need to really, think about, and always carry that message and to co-create. So thank you very much once again, and a big applause may I request from those who are there, and those who are online. You can always, you are there and you can give your it's also a special occasion today, as we have a very esteemed colleague, who has joined us from Singapore, from one of the most prestigious, the world's ranking, perhaps number 5 or 6, NTU, Nanyang's Technological University. I have a profound privilege and honor in welcoming Mrs. Go Soo Nee, the Deputy Director of Open Science and Research Services at Nanyang's Technological University. And I must thank Dr. Kathleen, who really has made it possible for us to have Sue with us this morning. And thank you so much, Kathleen, to you. And thank you so much, Sue, for joining us. It's a profound privilege and honor for me now to request Mrs. Soo Nee, the Deputy Director of Open Science and Research Services at one of the most esteemed, institution at the world ranking, among the top 10 best ranked institutions of the world, wherein she is taking care of the Open Science and Research Services initiative. If you may like to apprise us that, the initiatives being done at NTU, and how do you, see the futuristic trends happening, at NTU and also in this part of the world, and how really to, move ahead and carry the strong message. So may I have a pleasure in requesting Mrs. Go Soo Nee to kindly deliver her talk.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sangeeta. I'm Go Soo Nee from Singapore, from Nanyang Technological University Library. So very happy to be here. I thought I was just accompanying Kathleen to the talk. Yeah. So I am a librarian. I started with cataloging, and that was a long time ago. And when we were doing cataloging, then when we had the news of let's do open access, so it got us so excited, because we started to be involved in institutional repository work. So as catalogers, then we had to be involved with metadata, and didn't stop there. So what happened after that? It's not just about open access for publications. We had to work with then the Research Integrity Office to look at, is there anything that the library can do for research data? So that got us so excited. We had reorganization within the library. So we were looking at what can we do to the university. So we started looking at research data policies, and that's where we learned about data sharing. And we thought that let's do something about data sharing. So that was when the library formed the research data management unit, and some librarians were asked to look at setting up a data sharing repository. So we moved on from DSpace for papers to having a Dataverse set up for open data sharing. So we had to do more. It's not just about providing an infrastructure for open data sharing. We were looking at services. So it's also about metadata, but we had to build on the metadata knowledge to look at how else can we connect to the outer world out there. So we were looking at standards. We were looking at open science recommendations like reproducible science. So what would make a data set on a repository reusable? So we had to run data management planning workshops. We developed the university's data management plan template. We had to work with the research services, the research support office in the university to integrate the data management plan submission into the university's research info system to make it compulsory for them to go through that data sharing thought process to pick for data sharing. And then when they deposit the data sets in the university's repository for open data, how do they make it reusable? So we were looking at data documentation, which we share in the workshops, etc. So yeah, this is where we are now. We are looking at running conferences, workshops, talking about reproducible science, data documentation, responsible data sharing. We are looking at as open as possible, but necessary. So we work closely with the university's data governance policy colleagues on that as well. So we welcome all of you to come for the November conference that we will be running. It will be on the 12th of November. So please, if you can come, it will be in Singapore. So we look forward to seeing you then. Thank you very much for having me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sue, for joining us today. And indeed, we have truly appreciated your presence. And thank you very much for also inviting everyone, to visit Singapore and to NTU. Thank you so much indeed. We would now, I believe, because each one of us are having this wonderful occasion to meet Dr. Kathleen and Suni over here, I think it's now a time for us, firstly, to give now some more prominence to our online attendees, who are there with us. And we would like to make the floor open firstly for them for the question answers. So I would be requesting both Dr. Kathleen and Sue to kindly use their microphones on the table, and I would like to moderate from here the QA session. Requesting, no, not here, in person. Let's firstly do with the online, and then we are going to have more engaging talk with our all colleagues, who are being here with us in person. Requesting all our attendees who are here with us this morning, wonderful morning, a very illuminated, highly illuminated morning, to kindly raise your digital hand to ask the question. You can also post your question in the chat box, but definitely we may like to get you connected with our esteemed colleagues over here requesting you, please raise your digital hand. This is for our online attendees. For the online attendees, requesting you, please raise your digital hand if you may like to ask a question and we may like to give you a control. There will be only one round of questions from the online attendees. I'm moving from A to Z now. A to Z, that is with your individual names. And once it gets missed out, it's not going to be. Your time starts now, and I'm just moving now from A to Z, looking for our colleagues who may like to ask a question. Please ensure, to introduce yourself well before you pose a question, and also the institution from where you belong to. So from A, I'm moving down from A to Z. We clearly have got around more than 500 attendees who are here right now. And just quickly, if you have any questions, please raise your digital hand and we will be really delighted. We have Jyotika Nanda Das. And so you can see from A, I have moved on till J. So this is for you, Dr. Jyotika Nanda Das. We request you kindly unmute yourself. This is for you, Dr. Jyotika Nanda Das. Please unmute yourself. Das, I may not be able to say more than twice or thrice. Please unmute yourself. I have unmuted you from here. Not able to do it, please kindly post your question in the chat box. I'm just quickly now moving on to see who else may like to ask a question. This is for Kirtesh. This is for you, Kirtesh Raj. This is for Mr. Kirtesh Raj, who has raised his hand. Kirtesh Raj, could you please unmute yourself? Unmute yourself. Not, I am compelled to mute you now from here. So, and this is what really happens at times in the online. Please, you have to just, I'm now moving on to Leena Natham. Also ensure that those of you who are really wanting to ask a question, only raise your hands. Don't try to figure out about the particular options which are being there. This is for you, Leena Natham. Leena Natham, raised your digital hand. Could you please unmute yourself? Kathleen, please bear with me. Yeah. So this does happen at times, that they have raised the hand. It's not that generally they've been wanting to ask the question, but they were wanting to figure out, how the particular option works. And then you get a false alarm. So we are just moving on to C before then we make the floor open for, this is for you, Mr. Pramod Singh. I can't give you a connect. There is no audio device connected with you. So I'm compelled to not ask you. This is for Ragini Shrivastava. Ragini, I have unmuted you, requesting you to unmute yourself and ask your question. This is for you, Ragini Shrivastava. Our colleagues, don't raise the, click on to the microphone, your digital hand if you don't want to ask a question, because this takes away everyone's time. So we would appreciate your understanding on this. We would like to go to Richa Gotham. Richa Gotham, maybe request you to unmute yourself. Just like to, I think, yeah, she also has got login. We're just trying to see. Sabita Sethi. Sabita Sethi, if you have any questions, please unmute yourself. This is for you, Sabita Sethi. Could you please yourself? Oh. We'll just quickly go to, this is for Sanjay Banawar. Sanjay Banawar, could you please unmute yourself? Sanjay Banawar, You'll just see otherwise what's, the chat box messages which are being there, and I'm requesting our colleagues who are being there. We have Dr. Shantanu Ganguly. Dr. Shantanu Ganguly from Ashoka University, the Director, Library Services. Dr. Shantanu.
Thank you, Sangeeta. Can you hear me, Sangeeta?
But it's working. I have been really struggling hard that what's really happening, that no one is able to speak, and what is going wrong with the GoToWebinar, and to put in a complaint that in our prestigious program we couldn't hear our attendees. And it's really so comforting. You
Yeah.
right time. Thank you so much. And Dr. Shantanu, I would like to turn to Dr. Kathleen and Sue, one of our most vibrant and one of the most dynamic library professional colleague, and who is now heading the Library Services Director at Ashoka University. So it's a profound privilege to have you, Shantanu. Thank you very much. And I would like to request you to kindly go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, Sangeeta. Thank you, Professor Kathleen. In fact, I'm trying to, come down to tomorrow for the conference of COAR. I already received the invitations and all. It's not a question, and probably from the esteemed panel who are sitting there, I just want to have your reflections on towards, because in your presentations, you have talked about the research output, whereas I really look into the research outcome. So as far as the open science is concerned, how do you look at the outcome level of the different research that is taking place with special reference to sustainable development goals, SDGs? If you can have some reflections on that. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, trying to track research outcomes, as you probably know, is a much more complicated and difficult thing than tracking research outputs. Research outputs are things that we can count, like number of data sets, number of publications, and so on. We make the assumption that if those research outputs are more widely available, then they will contribute to better outcomes and more widely adopted outcomes. But often you don't really learn about outcomes in that way until quite farther along down the timeline. So when something has been implemented in practice, it changes the way a medical procedure is done and so on. So I think they're much more difficult to identify research outcomes, but of course they are the most important thing. So I do believe there is a connection between outputs and outcomes in terms of if there are more research outputs available, then that will improve the outcome. But it's not such an easy measure to track.
Okay, if I could add on, so in my call, I turn it off. Hello, can you hear me? Okay, that's great. So if I may add, the work that we do is not just about research outputs, but as an open science and research services librarian, what we do is to advocate, to go into how you would like to plan for the research impact as well. So thanks very much for that great question. which I love very much because that is what we advocate. So recently, I was invited to do a budgeting for data sharing, outputs, and impact. So when we want to do budgeting, it's not just about budgeting for APC or manpower resources to help you with your experiments, but it's also about what do you do with the post-project outcomes. What can you do to achieve those outcomes that you want to achieve in order to ensure that long-lasting impact? So the questions we ask our researchers to think about would be, who is the target audience? Who are the beneficiaries of your research project? So identify what the impact would look like, and we try to incorporate open science into delivering all these research outputs as well. So think about open educational resources that you can derive from these scientific contents that you're coming up with. Think about open code. What kind of code, softwares, scripts can you make available out there for people to reuse? Make a copy available on GitHub, make a copy available on the repository. How do you then contextualize it to support the sharing so as to achieve the kind of impact that you want? So think about that. So we have developed checklists, we do workshops surrounding all these things. So thanks very much for that great question.
Thank you very much, panel members.
Thank you very much, Shantanu, for a brilliant question, and thank you so very much, our distinguished, panelists and speakers, for a very extraordinary reply, to this question, which has really opened up again. We can have further deliberations. This is something, which really holds a great relevance when we think about the open science, open research, and thank you so very much indeed, Dr. Shantanu, for this. Thank you. We would now like to move on and would like to see if we have any other colleagues, who may like to. We have Shivani, who may like to ask a question. Shivani, please kindly unmute yourself. Shivani, if you may like to ask any question, please unmute yourself. Because of paucity of time, we sincerely regret we can't really wait for long for the systems or for you to respond, so please be a little more proactive in getting the discussions. I would now like to, it seems that I just quickly would like to see if we have any of our colleagues who are left out. No, there is one. I will just see, and we are going to make colleagues who are being here. Mr. Santosh Pethane, I'm just trying to establish a connect with you. Mr. Santosh Pethane, if you are wanting to ask a question yourself. If not, the opportunity has gone. So now we would now like to make the floor open for our wonderful colleagues who have taken out, their time, and we truly appreciate, admire, your coming over here. And we are indeed, much feeling happy about it that our colleagues from Delhi and NCR, I could see that from many of the, even not only from Delhi, but also from many of our adjoining cities, our colleagues have been able to come. So a big applause for each one of you who have been able to come in person. Give a big applause to the one who is sitting next to you. And thank you so very much. It's because, it's always so wonderful to have in-person interactions, and for connections, having more wider kind of a reach. Definitely, we are being there. Our identities are now all being merged. So it's an in-person and online, and we truly admire and appreciate your coming over here. Floor is entirely open now for our colleagues, for each one of you to ask any question, any query, anything that you would like to get benefited with the gracious presence of our distinguished speakers. Floor is entirely open. Please raise your hand, and we would be happy to give you a speaker to raise your question. Any question? And you may kindly ask.
time explanation of this. That you have given that USRN and OpenAI, LibSense, and the repositories names here. How to we have to become a member of? We have to use these repositories or.
Those names you're mentioning were from my slide that showed the regional and national networks. So OpenAIR is a regional network that harvests repositories in Europe. So they're a European network. LibSense is an African network that is very slowly evolving. It's not very mature right now. La Referencia is a network of repositories in Latin America, in 12 Latin American countries. So I would say for India, there are repository networks that you could join. For example, there is an aggregator in the UK called COAR, not my COAR, but CORE. And what they do is they aggregate the metadata and the full text of the content in repositories and then bring it together through a discovery interface. So there are some international repository aggregators like COAR or BASE, which is based in Germany. But ideally, I think what I think is the best way to move forward, even though you can already be part of those international networks, is to have a national Indian aggregator network. And the idea is that if the aggregator or the network is based in India, then you have much stronger relationships with Indian institutions, and you can ensure that they are adopting good practices and so on. And then once there's a network here, those networks can share data with each other, with the European network, with the African network, with the Latin American network. So we have this global international knowledge base, shall we say, based on these many networks of repositories. So, I mean, for me, the ideal would be for India to move forward with its own network, but in the meantime, there are some that you could work with called CORE, which is based in the UK, or BASE, which is based in Germany. And I'm happy to provide you with contact information for them.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Dr. Ramo, I would just like to mention, as I mentioned earlier, that we have just hardly 3 days ago, we have made a prototype now for the knowledge repositories, and that is harvesting. It's entirely a discovery platform which is being there, and wherein we have picked up, out of the COAR members, 130, we have picked up a sample records from 5 of those, and we have harvested them. And tomorrow in my presentation, I'm just going to show. So in the days to come, DELNET is definitely, and as being mentioned by Dr. Kathleen, that yes, more content to come from India, because much of individual institutions, research institutions, they are generating much of content, but it still remains out of, this discovery. So discoverability of the resources is not only the accessibility that we have to think about, we also have to think about more of the discoverability, and that's the library professionals. Each one of us has a greater responsibility to play, both at a national level, also to build up then the global. But the most important thing, this is, as Dr. Kathleen has said, we have to come out firstly the best practices, because you can participate in all these initiatives if you are, qualifying, it's not that, you are using, not the protocols, not the standards, and then we think about sharing that, these are the systems they talk. It's not that we are talking to each other, and then the systems they talk, whatever, it is all an AI-based kind of a thing. So they can't really intelligently think about it. The systems they speak, and this interoperability of the systems, having the same standards in place, I think, we greatly admire the initiatives of COAR, having these meetings, OA meeting here in Asia. It is also to, synergize. It is also to, create a kind of an, sensitizing the professionals about it, that to adhere to the standards. But I must say that in the days to come, DELNET will definitely be, because we have already made this prototype, and now it is a matter of approaching the institutions and asking them that if you have a repository, and is it an OIPMH compliant, and is your data being open enough for harvesting? You may have, but you have not given a permission. You don't want that someone else to harvest, your metadata. So all those issues one has to really look into, both within the country and also at a global. But yes, one has to move on, keep on doing it, whosoever comes along. So it's just like that you may start alone, you may look back and say no one is there, and as you move, you'll be able to see many of who have been having the same ideologies they have been wanting to do, and this is how the partnerships are being grown. So we really look forward, and Dr. Kathleen, we would be really keen enough, to work together and to see that how one can do some very good convincing groundwork here in India, bringing these institutions, organizations like DELNET, 8,500 institutions we have. So we already have a huge big test bed. We want to do anything, spread, the message to ask them that how many of them are having the repositories, how many of them may like to participate in this, mutual collaborative process of making their, data accessible, and since the platform is ready, we really can do. And we will really look forward, to the partnerships, to get established. Thank you very much. And thank you, Dr. Ramu, for asking this question. Any question? Yes, please. Yeah, please, kindly. Lalita, introduce yourself and kindly ask the question.
Hello, Dr. Lalita from IMS Ghaziabad. I just want to know more about the green and gold open access. This I wanted to know. It is not a query or question. I just need to know about.
Well, open access is publishing in an open access journal. So a journal that's open access. And green access is publishing in a subscription-based journal and depositing the article into an open repository. So there are two different ways of making an article openly available. One is to publish directly in an open access journal, and one is to publish in a subscription-based journal that isn't open access, but you deposit your article in a repository. Recently, we've seen a lot of emphasis in the policy environment on repositories. I don't even like to say green, I just call it the repository route, because it's seen as a more equitable route. Because of the increasing number of article processing charges and the amount that they are being charged, it's prohibitive to researchers. So a lot of new policies that are coming out very much favor the green route or the repository route, so that they know that everybody can comply with the repository. Did that answer your question?
Yeah. So, in the university library that I work in, we do provide APC support. APC article processing charge for the paying the publisher to publish open access immediately. There's this type of journal that's called hybrid journal as well. So it offers both non-open access as well as open access. So the gold open access could also be taking place in hybrid journals. Yeah, so as a library, how we support both would be for gold. When we negotiate with publishers on the renewal of the subscription, sometimes it could come along with some APC waivers, discounts, vouchers, etc. So in a way, that could be part of that APC support. For green OA, we support by having the institutional repository, but it means providing that service where we will need to make sure that only the accepted manuscript version is deposited in there, so as not to infringe any copyright obligations with the publisher. So yeah, the green open access, there is this thing about embargo period that we have to take a look at as a librarian to make sure that nothing is infringed. So thanks. Welcome.
Adas from JNU Jawaharlal University. Education. My question is related to your presentation. I related to open science development or open science landscape. So you talked about 2025 onward, you see the transformation, but you have not explained what transformation you want to see, but or we can also be part of those transformation. So how we can engage with that transformation?
I mean, the reason scholarly publishing hasn't transformed at all is because there are 5 companies making billions of dollars on every year on scholarly publication. And it's not in their interest for anything to transform or change, except for the business model so that they can make more money off APC, you know. So I think we're in a position now, a very good position, where we now have funders who don't pay hybrids. Never. They will not pay for a hybrid because that does nothing to move the publisher towards open access. Some of them are no longer paying APCs. They're requiring preprints. And once you start to see researchers depositing their preprints and overlay, so we're seeing these peer review services that they're not the traditional publishers that have this workflow where they ingest the article. You deposit your preprint onto a repository, onto bioRxiv, one of these big repositories, and there's a peer review services that you can, as an author, request a review, have the review done, and the review service links back to the article, to the preprint. So we call this model publish, curate, and review. And it's becoming more widely acceptable in the biomedical fields. For example, eLife is now will only publish articles that have been shared as preprints. So to me, I think this is really something that's going to if we can get enough momentum around this, we can really transform. That will be the real transformation, as well as, you know, having research data out there, connecting those articles with the research data, peer review on research data. So I guess a much more diverse and distributed environment where things are linked, but not controlled by these 5 companies that want to maintain the intellectual property and are making a lot of profit. Because it's not, in the end, it's not in the interest of science. It just isn't. You know, what's in the interest of science is sharing content as widely as possible, and you being able to read articles that are written in Berlin or wherever, and if it's related to your research. So I mean, science, the good of science has not been driving the evolution of scholarly publishing for a long time. And so my hope is that that kind of transformation will happen, but we'll have to wait and see whether I'm right.
Yeah, if I may add, thanks very much, Dr. Anup, for the question. The butterfly, wow, that's a beautiful metaphor of that transformation. I think how librarians can play a role as this is by looking at what we can achieve out of the green OA. So thanks very much for the question as well. The green OA. So what we tell our authors, especially when the publications may not be indexed in Scopus or Web of Science, especially for the non-STEM, the non-STM professors, they might have publications in some of these journals that are not indexed in Web of Science or Scopus. So if they deposit a copy of the paper in the institutional repository, make it open access, whether it's following an embargo period or not, you know, of course, if there's a need to do that, we will need to do that. But the good thing about doing the green OA in the institutional repository is that as a librarian, we ensure that the repository adheres to some standards, and then it gets indexed by Google Scholar. So when the publications are indexed by Google Scholar, the researcher, the author, can keep track of the impact. So thanks for the question on the impact here. So relating green OA to impact by, as a librarian, by making sure that the repository adheres to standards, the items in there the metadata gets indexed by Google Scholar. It benefits the authors by having all these citation counts in the Google Scholar profile. Okay, so I'm trying to connect the dots here. So thanks so much.
We have a follow-up question to Dr. Kathleen related to, you talked about doing with all the for-profit publishers, particularly big five publishers. So is there any international declaration related to this? Science landscape to non-profit publishers.
Definitely. I think there's a lot of discussions happening in different venues. I think UNESCO, while they haven't, they might have explicitly said it, but the UNESCO recommendation comes very close to saying, certainly expressing a preference for not-for-profit infrastructures in the area of scholarly communications in general. There's a new discussion going on about diamond OA. Now there's green, gold, diamond, which is basically without APCs or subscriptions. So essentially all diamond open access publishers are publicly funded, not non-commercial infrastructures. And there's been a big push in Europe to try to advance those types of infrastructures in the ecosystem. So I think 10 years ago, everybody was scared to say, oh, the commercial companies are bad, but I think it's changed a lot now. Everyone realizes that we cannot work within the current system and achieve what we want to. We have to change the system profoundly. So there are a number of different, places for those conversations happening, I think.
Thank you very much for a series of questions. And that's really appreciated because it doesn't only help you, it helps everyone. So what you have asked, it's being, everyone was really wanting, but they were not able to really relate it, how to express it. So thank you very much, Dr. Anoop. Always appreciate value your presence. Thank you so much indeed. I think we have our colleague, who may like to ask a question. Introduce yourself.
My name is Ayan Mandal. I am from Tuli Research Center for India Studies, Basant Kunj. So thank you very much, Dr. Kathleen and Dr. Gyo, the wonderful session, and Dr. Sangeeta for hosting this session. So Dr. Kathleen, you have mentioned lots of barriers, right? Right from the subscription-based model to charging to authors and funding of all this, funding of the local government or local infrastructure. Right? So we have seen a couple of activities by the international publishers, and subsequently also seen the embargo by the government, of the various government. So my question is to Dr. Kathleen is that, is there any pressure on the government by the international publishers which creates an obstacle for the smooth transition or the funding the infrastructure?
I think they have very large lobbying, departments at those companies. So I work very closely with an organization in the United States called SPARC, and SPARC lobbies for, mainly in the US, lobbies the US government for open access. And they regularly come into contact with the publisher lobbies who are also very strong in terms of trying to convince the governments not to adopt strong policies for open access and open science. So I think they do play a very, you know, it's not, it's sort of opaque to us as members of the public, but I do think they have very strong lobbyists working on their behalf to try to, you know, maintain the status quo in terms of the way things are.
I believe this will take time, but soon in longer future we will able to cope up this situation and going for a open science thing.
Sort of like climate change, you know, like there's a strong lobby by certain industries, but eventually you can move things forward, and sometimes governments decide to do the right thing even though they're being lobbied. So I think we are at a place now where the governments, and especially because of COVID, they realize how important rapid sharing of information is to advancing scientific discoveries and so on. So, so let's hope that we can continue to move this forward.
Thank you. Any more questions from the floor? Yeah, Dr. Sangeeta. Thank you for joining us today.
I'm running at All India Institute of Medical Sciences, but that we call AIMS, AIMS. So it was wonderful to hear Dr. Nee as well as Dr. Kathleen, and obviously moderated by my friend, my dear friend, Dr. Sangeeta. I was immense, like it was very insightful. I loved each and every slide or every word that you're saying is quite impactful, and I really feel that change has come. This in the years to come, we'll be finding lot many changes, and I really feel for that oligopoly of the 5 publishers. And sometimes it makes me making where the society goes. So there's a number of questions. Butterfly model and the way open access and the scholarly publishing and the traditional publishing. So for 30 years in the profession, and slave shifted the matter and all that. Really immense with the changes and the things that are developing over the period of time. So, right there, how about intelligence? Has it really affected the large language models or anything will be integrated in Nanyang Technological University must be having, yes, am I sounding it right? NUS, what all changes you think will also services has changed in respect of integration of AI into your services or something that you would like to?
Okay. Thanks. So
Thanks.
if I understand your question correctly, you are asking about the impact of AI on library services. Thanks very much for the question. So I may not have a comprehensive answer to that. Maybe I can just speak to the work that I do. So well, for the work that we do, like I mentioned about budgeting for research data. So we were talking about because if you look at some of the funders' requirements, if you look at the U.S. National Institute of Health, the data sharing requirement says that the data that you share has to be AI and machine learning ready. So that is a requirement. It's not just dumping data files into a repository and say that my checklist is done, I've shared my data. It's not about that. It's about making sure that the data, or the open data, the open contents that you share is AI and machine learning ready. So what does this mean? I think we are still in the early stage. I was having a conversation with Kazu, my colleague who is from Japan. You will see him tomorrow about this. I think we could be at the point of time where we are looking at standards for data, for scripts, for softwares to be reusable, and for data to be AI and machine learning ready. So it's about budgeting for that. It's about getting the right skill set for people to make sure that the data can incorporate all these standards. So, but I don't really have much to say about that in terms of what kind of standards. And yeah, so we talk about all these things, but I think a lot depends on the types of data that you have as well. As for library services, what we do is because we have a team of librarians who frequently invite speakers to talk about AI. So we have invited publishers to talk about the AI tools that they provide on their platforms. We invite speakers from the university to talk about what they do for the AI project. So we are like a community space in terms of whether it's virtual space or physical space to help with the cross exchange of experience, etc. So yeah, I guess yeah, that's about it. Yeah, thanks.
You can quickly, Can. Anyone else? Yeah, do you have our, who would like to ask? Yourself?
Yeah, am I audible?
Yeah, very much.
Okay, my name is Ashish Dosan. I'm from the Center for Studies in Science Policy, JNU. So basically, like the points Professor Kathleen touched about a global repository network at the beginning of her address. I would like to know more about the different models of post-publication review, and more importantly, what role do you see for technology in this infrastructure? As in, what is the vision for infrastructure going ahead?
Actually, we are currently working at COAR on a project that we were funded by the Arcadia Foundation. We got $4 million to develop a standard protocol that would link articles in repositories with external peer review services. So this is a question right down my alley. There are a number of different types of peer review services that kind of fall on a spectrum. One is sort of just like a thumbs up, very basic, what you might see on social media, which, I think there's limitations to that. Another review service, which we have been we've been working on use cases with review services and repositories to be able to advance this COAR Notify project. The other review services could be like very traditional journals. So they do a review as a journal would, but they don't ever ingest the article into the workflow. So the article just stays on the repository in bioRxiv or in arXiv or medRxiv or whatever. A third type is where they do a review, an external review, and then based on that review, it becomes published in another journal. So the review service is essentially an intermediary doing the review on behalf of the journal. And once the review has come out positively in whatever sense, the journal will invite that article to be published in its journal. So those are the kind of things that we're seeing evolve. There still are not a lot of them. And one of the activities in our project is to develop infrastructure that could be used by these types of services, because right now you just have to kind of create your own platform to do it. So next year we will be submitting a call for proposals for certain organizations to develop some overlay journal functionality that might be useful. And then, for example, if you wanted to start a journal here in India, an overlay journal, you could download the software and review, you know. So that's the kind of thing that I hope will expand and evolve in the ecosystem. I think I may be being too idealistic, but hoping like in 5 years, could we have 20% of diamond journals who are working in that way? Because the value of that is you're splitting the responsibilities. So the repository takes on the preservation, providing access, and the peer review service undertakes the peer review. So for small journals, it's a lot easier for them to sort of manage in this particular way.
Question from the floor. Anyone else would like to? I can see that, yeah, the Sangeeta is wanted to ask another question, but still before I request her, anyone wants to ask? Yeah, the last one now. Yes, yeah, please.
I conducted one of the questionnaire I submitted to my friends to just review and put their remarks or something what they want to. That was on scholarly communication and the assessment tools. But later I submitted it. I gave it to the residents or the researchers what they have to speak about scholarly communication. What are their suggestions or something. So one of the options, what they see the future of scholarly communications would be, it was, will that peer review be paid to the reviewer? And I really, some of the faculty members over there, they said, we have been doing reviewing the articles for a number of years. Then somewhere I find there is an organized and valued. That could be the possibility change, or maybe you would have to add something to it. I would be happy to hear from you. Both of you. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I mean, I think researchers in general are very busy. They have a lot of responsibilities. They're teaching, they're doing their research, they're writing articles, and then they're also asked to do peer review. So I feel their pain. I do believe there are some commercial publishers that pay peer reviewers, but I'm not sure which ones they are. And so I'm not really sure how to address this issue with researchers being so overburdened with work. But I do think, you know, providing some incentives like recognition for peer review could help in that way. I think it would be unfortunate if we moved to a model where we were paying peer reviewers for their reviews, because then, you know, yeah, then it sort of creates maybe not a very healthy incentive. But certainly recognition for peer review would be a good step forward.
Yeah, as a librarian who provides verification services for citation reports and giving suggestions to faculty members on evidences to demonstrate their research impact, we work with them on their dossiers, or if you know the term like CV, dossiers, which has to be submitted for their promotion and tenure applications. So one of the sections in that application form is about what roles do you play in the academic scene. So it could be editor of a journal, it could be peer review for which how many articles, etc., etc. So there are publishers who provide that peer review platform where all these peer review activities are captured, and that is where the evidences are collected. So well, yeah, if your university includes all these things as part of the research assessment, then that will be wonderful. Thanks.
Much. We are now inching towards the closure of this truly enlightening, enriching, and excellently delivered deliberations by our distinguished invited speakers, Dr. Kathleen and Dr. Su. And we can't really thank you enough. You know, what you have really gifted to us, your presence here. You have given us infinite possibilities to explore. And we feel so very that you are there along with us, showing us the light, showing us the way ahead as you are spearheading the organization which is being dedicated, for the years altogether to spread the message. And we truly feel so very honored, with your presence, the presence of both Dr. Kathleen and so. It lead to the better outcomes, what deliberations we have carried today. Each one of us here in this hall, those who are being there online, they are all from the different organizations, and but yes, the purpose and also the concerns are the same. We are all onto the scholarly communications. We are working for our scholars community. We as a library professionals have got a tremendous opportunities. Challenges always comes, with the opportunities when we think about, they are more when we are into the challenging times. And I think each one of us today has felt truly enlightened on this very, very essence of this open science, and which has got, it's a borderless. It is something which knows no boundaries. And we as a professionals, everyone, each stakeholder in that. So it's right from those those who are producing, that content, those who are being expected to, make it in a way which has got it's not only a seamless access, it is that reach has to be there. And the reach can come when we are, making this as a global resource. So it's like a global community that we are serving. And I think we have to also, have reorient, realign ourselves that we are serving to a global community. Whatever we are doing, we should not keep ourselves limited, to the specific countries, locations. We should have that global vision, act locally, but should have a very common shared vision, and everyone has to contribute towards it. We have truly felt so enlightened, happy, delighted with the very illuminating presence of both our distinguished speakers who have made this day truly a memorable day. Thank you very much for your very gracious presence, taking out time. We know that you have got a huge agenda. There's like a prelude to the, the 2 days conference, the 2 days meeting that you have. And in spite of that, you have been able to take out time for us. We remain truly grateful for that. We also would truly admire the presence of our colleagues, who have been here in person, making the sessions truly thought-provoking, brainstorming. You are the ones who have really added, the flavor to it by asking all those pertinent questions, which really has made everyone, to get benefited and out of these deliberations. We remain truly grateful and thankful to you for your time and efforts, and all our online attendees who have been able to spare time. It's a time now for us to present small mementos. The mementos are small, but the gratitude is boundless. We remain truly grateful. We're going to cherish forever your very, very kind, gracious presence, for being so, it's not, you are having those open thoughts. Let me just say that, Dr. Kathleen. We have interacted in the month of November. It carried on for a few weeks. And I must say that it's not that you are advocating the open science, the open mantra. You are also the person with a very open heart, who is so welcoming. Confidence in our communications when we initiated. And when that mail came from Vishali that, yes, we are holding now, so I said, it's a time now to, and you have been so kind and gracious and accommodating, acceding to our request. Remain truly grateful. Thank you so much, Sue, for deciding to come. We're grateful. So these are small mementos being given, requesting each one of you give a very big applause as we present. Firstly, a memento. This is a plaque of honor given to Dr. Kathleen Shearer for splendidly delivering an invited lecture on the critical role of libraries in open science world, held on April 16, 2024 at DELNET, New Delhi, India. We look forward to your coming back. Thank you so much. We remain truly, truly grateful and thankful to Soni, the Deputy Director at Nanyang Technological University. We really look forward to many more collaborations, many more works to do together. And it has been truly a pleasure. And I must say that this is the first visit, the maiden visit of Sue to India and to Delhi, right? This is for the first time. And we really look forward here again. And thank you so much for your deliberations today. It has truly been valued. A small elephant story with great sense of appreciation. Yeah, towards the closure of this most memorable talk, remain truly grateful to each one of you for being there as a part of this special day today. And we really look forward to having you back in the future sessions. Requesting those of my colleagues who are being here in person to join us for lunch. And those who are online, we request you to do kindly have lunch and look out. And we look forward, do remember that we look forward to an opportunity to having you in person and to offer our hospitality. Thank you very much, one and all. God bless you all, and truly a great honor and pleasure in having each one of you today. Thank you so much. Thank you indeed. Thank you.